Once your data is in the cloud, cutting-edge services are at your fingertips. And our next speaker is a really great example of taking advantages of these cloud services. Alexa, who's up next?
Please welcome Professor Swaine Chen, Genome Institute of Singapore.
Hello, my name is Swaine Chen, and I represent the Genome Institute of Singapore. We're a national initiative in Singapore whose mission is to apply genomic technologies to improve the health and lives of Singaporeans. So I want to get one question out of the way first, because I know that not everybody in this room may be a biologist, and that is, what is genomics? So maybe I can take you back to, say, grade school or high school biology, and hopefully you remember that all organisms, including humans, are made of cells. And inside each cell is a nucleus. Inside of a nucleus, there are chromosomes, and then those chromosomes in turn are made of DNA. The entire set of DNA that's present in a nucleus, which should be the same in all the cells in an organism, we call that the genome, the organism's genome. And of course, genomics is the study of these genomes. Now, genomes, DNA, they may be referred to as the book of life, or like the blueprint of life. And those are actually not bad analogies, because one of the first things that we need to do when we do genomics is to essentially read that book. And we do that by a process called DNA sequencing or genome sequencing. And in terms of blueprints, we also know that there are instructions encoded in the DNA. So human DNA makes us humans. Other animals, like lions, have lion DNA that makes them lions. Our DNA makes us human because it influences the size and shape of our bones. It influences how our brains develop. And therefore, I think you can see that it's very clear that our DNA also impacts our health. It can impact our risk for heart disease, or cancer, or diabetes. And this is why, at the Genome Institute, our mission is to use genomics to try to improve human health. But we don't have to only study the DNA of humans. So we can also understand the DNA of other organisms, such as bacteria that cause infections. And that's what my research does. So I'm going to tell you about an outbreak of bacterial infections that happened in Singapore a few years ago. This outbreak was caused by a bacteria called Group B Streptococcus, or GBS. And there were several remarkable things about this outbreak. First, it was the biggest outbreak of GBS infections ever in the world. Second, as part of medical knowledge, we know what GBS does. We know that GBS causes infections in newborn babies or in elderly individuals. But in this Singapore outbreak, it was a different patient population. It was otherwise healthy adults. And those otherwise healthy adults were getting infected at much higher rates than the babies and the elderly people that we normally expect. And the only thing that we could figure out was in common with these healthy adults was that a lot of them had, in recent weeks, eaten some raw fish. Again, that's also remarkable for Group B Streptococcus infections, because GBS infections, standard medical teaching says you don't get GBS infection by eating contaminated food. So this is where genomics really played a crucial role in trying to establish this connection between food consumption and GBS infections. And the way we did that was we used genomics as a kind of fingerprinting. It's very similar to how we might find the fingerprint of a culprit at the scene of a crime. We were able to show that the Group B Streptococcus causing infections in human patients was the exact same as the GBS that we isolated from raw fish samples from the food stalls that they ate at. So genomics really helped to show that this outbreak came from eating fish contaminated with GBS. This helped to guide the public agencies in terms of putting in some controls for the handling and consumption of raw fish, and led to the cessation of the outbreak. Why do we need the cloud for analyzing genomics, though? So that's an example, again, of how genomics can help human health. And there's a very simple reason why we're now inevitably moving to the cloud. So I think everyone in this room is familiar with Moore's law, and here it is. It's a transformative rate of progress. The corresponding line for genomics looks like this. Okay, and I think you can see that we're pulling away from Moore's law. We're pulling away exponentially as time goes on. This is generating what I call the hyper-Moore gap of genomics. And of course, AWS moving to the cloud gives us the capacity to bridge this hyper-Moore gap. And now I'm not going to talk about it today, but I'll show some more details about this in one of the breakout sessions tomorrow on genome analytics. It's not just having millions of computers that solves the problems. We also have to put these into the hands of our researchers to do the genomics analysis. And so AWS also provides the simplicity for our researchers to harness that huge capacity to bridge the hypermore gap. And now we can keep up with this accelerated rate of data generation. But one of the more exciting things, one of the biggest opportunities, is not just to keep up. Maybe we can actually get ahead of this curve. Maybe we have an opportunity to do new innovation and new projects that we never would have been able to before. And this is really one of the exciting opportunities. To give you an example of that, I want to go back to infection. Singapore is a tropical country, and it has to deal with several tropical diseases, one of which is dengue. Dengue is endemic throughout the entire region, including in Singapore. We want to take the lessons where genomics helped us with the Group B streptococcus infection. Could we apply those to improve our response to dengue infections? We still get outbreaks there. Could we detect the outbreaks earlier? Could we forecast transmission? Could we use that to target interventions to stop these outbreaks sooner and do public communication? So dengue, a little bit about dengue, all of this rests on two big pillars. The first is infrastructure. So dengue is a viral disease that's transmitted by mosquitoes. And to control dengue, one of the things you have to do is control mosquito breeding. Singapore saw this, and Singapore is remarkable in terms of its commitment to and its building out of infrastructure. So when they saw this, their first response was, okay, we need to build the infrastructure to do monitoring of mosquito breeding. And since 2006, they put in place a national monitoring infrastructure where every non-residential building in Singapore is inspected every 3 months. This leads to over 1 million inspections every year. This is an unparalleled monitoring infrastructure in Singapore, and it's not genomic yet. So we asked the question, could we upgrade this outstanding infrastructure? Could we take it up another level and add genomics to this, make them 1 million genomics inspections? That leads us to the second pillar. How would we get genomic data streams coming in from the field? You can see that they're distributed throughout all of Singapore. And just as Moore's law has given us devices that fit in our hands for computing, the hypermore rate of progress for genomics is doing the same thing, where just a few years ago, we had machines that were the size of small vehicles. Now we have machines or devices that fit in the palm of our hand. So we're approaching this IoT transition, and this is providing us a clear path to really make all of those million inspections for dengue, for mosquito breeding. It gives us a clear path forward to upgrading those to genomic inspections for mosquitoes and for dengue. And of course, now that raises the final question of what do we do? How do we process 1 million genomic data streams that are coming in? And of course, the IoT infrastructure of AWS is going to be crucial for that. And here's where the real opportunity is. A serverless, event-driven kind of paradigm that's totally new for genomics. We don't do this at all. Okay, so to take a first step along that path, what we did at GIS was we took one of the steps of our genome processing pipeline, and we re-implemented that on AWS Lambda, a serverless technology. And in doing so, we were able to drop the compute time from 6 hours to 15 minutes and save 95% of the cost. And needless to say, we're super excited about continuing down this path of serverless, event-driven computing. And that, combined with the IoT transition of genomics, and combined with the existing outstanding infrastructure in Singapore, we really see a vision where we could have genomic devices collecting data throughout the city, scattered throughout the environment, uploading data to the cloud. And this is what we call pervasive or ubiquitous genomics. And it dovetails perfectly with another initiative of the Singapore government, which is called the Smart Nation Initiative. And at GIS, we really see genomics as yet another data layer that can integrate into what ends up being an additional upgrade to the already outstanding infrastructure in Singapore. This genomics data, put into the Smart Nation context, should be able to help us achieve our mission of improving human health. It can help us with infection outbreaks, as I told you. And we also think that it can integrate into other urban applications, such as food safety and forensics, which I didn't talk about today. So I really want to thank AWS for providing us with this power. I want to thank Teresa and AWS for the opportunity to share these ideas and this vision with you. And I really thank you guys all for your attention. Thank you.